Everyone to True Story, December 2024. My friends here, thank you all for being here. Thank you, writers. Thank you, Christopher. Thank you for volunteers, Eve and Tom and Paul. I'm going to thank you now in case I, get too drunk and crazy later. Our theme tonight is 'Tis the Season. We've used this one before in other holiday seasons, as a matter of fact, but this year just felt different, and I thought revisiting it now at a moment when I think everyone's feeling a little emotional about the state of the world and the state of our country and our well-being. And True Story is a place to show up and speak your truth and know that you are in a safe space where you will be whole. And I think that is the idea that I'm going to take moving forward to be of service to all of our artists and friends who need to be heard at this time. We may not all agree, doesn't matter. We're all here together. We're all in it together. Welcome. Is that Eliza B? I see it. Oh no, it's Arabella. Another tall person. So I just wanted to especially thank the writers this time, because it was a very difficult time to write. Everyone expressed it. And yet here we are to celebrate our community, to celebrate in community, and to tell some truths. True story is a phrase we use when we're both about to tell the truth and or embellish upon it. We have been doing this since May of 2015, which makes us 9 years old today. No, in May. And we're going strong. We have started live streaming last year. And we soon will have a revamped website with the recorded content on it. So please keep your eyes and ears open on the interwebs. That will happen during January. But right now, we have a big holiday event to get through. So let's just get started. We're going to start with Abira Ali, Gordon Henderson. And I'm not going to tell you anything else because I know they're going to explain it all. But give me a second to get up there and get situated because I'm pressing the buttons for the projector. So,
at least one of us is probably an over-explainer. So we're in the business of making calendars, and we have one with us. I know that with calendars around the holiday season, it's it's one of the most obvious and crassly commercial sort of calling cards you could have. We're in the company of banks and dry cleaners. On the other hand, there is a thing about measuring time, which is what could be more profound than measuring time. And there's a mortal aspect to that too. I could prattle on. Okay, so this year we talked about it beforehand, but there's a lot of planning that goes into this, and we kind of work all year. And we started at some point. We decided that what we should do is document all the kind of businesses that we like, the unknown landmarks that they might be landmarks, but they're sort of underappreciated, and they might not be there the next time you drive down a certain street. And so we decided that we would concentrate on the animals that you see in the signage and in the to do with buildings.
That was just for this year. But it kind of came about. This was one of the first images. I was stuck in a hotel room in Monterey because I had a solo art show there at the museum. And I was really happy and lucky, but I was just, Gordon had sketched out this one and one other one. And I didn't have any family, or I was just like in this little town on the sea. And so this was, we started with these before we really knew what we were going to do. And I will say this, Gordon did the calendar for 39 years. I've always helped him because we've been married. We've been together a really long time. And I used to be more like, help with the glitter, help with the dirt in the bag, things like that. Go and buy the little bags to put the dirt in.
From a place that sold crack supplies. I mean, we started doing the crack epidemic, and there was a place down the street from us where you could buy like these tiny little bags where people would put crack in. We put dirt in them because I had a dirty calendar. It kind of included dirt, and then the next year we had a clean calendar, and it came with a little handy wipe.
Yeah, the dirt was actually how I found out about that store. Was I went in, it was 160th Street in Manhattan, and I asked for Pringles, and the guy was like, "Those aren't Pringles," and I was like, "Well, it's Pringles." They were selling all the different cans, had different size baggies in them. Oh, so that was what that was. And so I could get any kind of baggie that I needed. So we bought them. And my brother came back from Madagascar, and we used Madagascar dirt. And what was the stamp?
It was beautiful dirt.
It
really.
said,
it includes dirt.
Includes dirt, yeah. Rubber stamp. But this was our first piece. Last year we did the calendar together, where we did all the artwork, the reason I ended up joining him with the artwork was Gordon had a few pieces and he couldn't finish them, and he was ready to give up the calendar altogether. And I just said, well, I'll finish them for you. And then we started just painting on them together.
And this one is, you probably recognize, there's some of them, we call it unknown landmarks, but some of the landmarks are actually, very known landmarks, like this one, which is the Chicken Boy statue, which is in Highland Park. The Chicken Boy, made by a fiberglass company, the International Fiberglass Company of Venice in the 1960s, for a chicken place. Called Chicken Boy downtown, and in 1984 the owner died, and a local hero in Highland Park, Amy Inouye, got the Chicken Boy statue, saved him from a dumpster. He was made the same company that you made the Muffler Men and Paul Bunyan statues, very manly statues, but this one, instead of a muffler or an axe, he got a chicken and a chicken head. And which, it's just mixed signals a little bit. And Amy saved him and had him in a warehouse for over 20 years. And then the community in Highland Park, welcomed him to Highland Park, where he sits atop not a chicken place but a design studio, and he is famous internationally and known as the Statue of Liberty of Los Angeles. Let's move on to another local icon of
Gone.
The two lions. You don't see it, and from our perspective, you don't see both of them. But it was a glass company. The glass company was sold. The new owners didn't like the lions, so the original owner took the lions, and they went to Palmdale, and where they're going to be atop a Mexican restaurant. But Elijah's not here, but she remembers a time when she was in high school, when some of the letters on the side in front were missing, so that it said Devon Ass on the front of it. But we were sorry to see the lions go. They're gone. Anyway, let's move on to the giraffe. Still there. This is on Avenue 59. It was a daycare center, And it's like there's a hedge there, and the giraffe's head pokes up over the top of the hedge. I think that the daycare center's gone now, but the giraffe's still there.
So these are when we just started to say, let's just look for animals in the city. And that was, you know, they were just like, where can we find them? So then we decided to make a day.
Yeah.
And we
And I
spent the whole day driving around looking for animals.
and my friend Gary Leonard is a photojournalist, and documents the city of Los Angeles, and has for 60 years or so. And when I told him what we were up to, because we don't actually tell people the theme like this, but I figured with Gary it was safe, and I also knew that he would be a fountain of information. He said, "Well, you have to photograph the Ambassador Dog and Cat Hospital." We'll get to that. Let's go move on to the.
So this is a painting I did in college, which was, I think, like 1984, believe it or not. And that was across the street from where I lived on Cheltenham Avenue in Philadelphia, and Atlas Transmission. And then down the street was Disco Flower Mart and Disco Fish Market, two separate businesses. And I just put this in because both of us have always been looking at our urban environment, and that's the landscape. And we've both been really interested in painting those kinds of things. No, this isn't in the.
There's some people.
There's some people they're at the bus stop. Next.
Okay, so yeah, and I was up to the same kind of thing too. And this was also done in the 1980s, and this was Bay Area people will know. In San Francisco, there was a chain called Doggy Diner, and they had that big dachshund head was their mascot. This is one that was the Doggy Diner had already closed, I guess, by this time, and it was another restaurant which was called Carousel. It was on Ocean Boulevard, right by the zoo near Fort Funston, and I doubt that the restaurant's there now, but the Doggy Diner head has actually moved across the street, where in front of the zoo they've got the Doggy Diner head. It's immortalized there, still there. And there it is, the Ambassador Dog and Cat Hospital. And this is on Beverly, right where Beverly and becomes Silver Lake.
This was the day. This is New Year's Eve day, when we just decided this is what the calendar is going to be for 2025. So we started it New Year's Eve day 2023.
Yeah, that's right.
Day was, and we went all around LA, just looking for animals, mostly in the signs. And this was one of our places that we heard about from Gary. So we went to it.
But we knew about it, but he remembered a detail that we had forgotten, which was, let's see the next slide. These are reliefs on the side of the building, the dog and cat. That looks like Missy's dog Rabbit. So we did Beverly. Beverly's one of our favorite streets in the city. So we covered Beverly from Vermont to Western. And it was somewhat episodic.
I mean, you will, if anybody's been here for a long period of time, just watch everything totally change. And Beverly just has a lot of LA flavor as far as these original buildings that aren't franchises, and they're very original to whatever the specific business is.
Let's move on. There it is again. There's another view of it. We did a painting of this, or I guess Abira did. I don't know if I worked on it, but we decided to settle on the photograph. It's not in the calendar though.
You have to make like at least 20 paintings, and you got to cut at least 5. It's just part of the rules.
There's another place we like. This is on Beverly. This is the Miwohaka Market. Just a place we like. Very blue. It's got the cow on it. That's the arrow to get into it because it's actually not easy to find the front door of this place. So they've got a little. They tell you where to go. That's another view, and it actually says someone put it on there. Jesus saves. In case you didn't know. This is a place that really gave me a lot of pleasure when we were in the car, and this was in Vermont, and I looked out the window. It was Elephant Dental. I saw Elephant Dental, and so we had to like
New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
See that sign? Open.
Yeah. It's Sunday, December 31st, and the place is open. And the door, the door was open. You can see the door is open, but we just thought it was a great looking place and was perfect for us thematically. So we did the maneuvering that we had to do to get close to it.
Why are there half the bodies, skirts and legs?
Those are chairs. Yeah. There's those
Modern chairs.
they were like Ames style chairs. Yeah. Okay. This is another place that really gave me a lot of glee. Bubbles Dog Grooming, and there's a thing about the calendar. If you look each year and you go to May and June, and you can figure out what the family favorites are, because Liza always calls her favorite for that month. I want that in my month, and that was what she wanted. She wanted Bubbles Dog Grooming in here. I did a little research on the place. There wasn't much online, but they did show, what their services were. And one of the services that they offer is anal gland expression. And you can see the reflections in the glass that were handsomely painted by Abira. Let's move on. This is one of my favorite places on Beverly, and a lot of times I've gone to Beverly and worried that I wasn't there, because it's very easy to just pass by and not see it if you're driving. And it's a mom and pop ambulance place, Schaefer's Ambulance. And my favorite part is that it's in the air, on the ground, but in the air it kind of looks a little like a fish. But we were sad to notice that it's closed. Everything to do with ambulances is gone except for the sign. And it's just it's a vacant lot. But that sign is so lovely. I hope somebody saves that. Okay. We know this affectionately as the Crab Shack. It's called J. Boudreaux. This is on Western. It's just a place that
Kind of a rundown place in an abandoned looking type.
But it is
It's
still
really good
open.
for landscape painting.
Yeah. Next slide. There's another Crab Shack, and for as far as painting, it was a little bit of a toss-up with this place. An interesting thing about this was we split up and we were on foot, capturing different things. We were touristing it up out here, and I waited here for a while. And this place was open originally in 1965. It was still open when we were there. And we're going to see in a minute with the next slide, they had these horses' heads on poles, which I find intriguing. But I went back to Western a month or so ago, and this place was closed up and completely covered with graffiti. So it's like, that's one of these things where it's like you go one day and it's there, and the next time you go, it's closed or it's gone. Yeah, or a parking lot.
Yeah.
Next.
Now this place, it's just what we just need to know. What do they do? What is that?
Yeah. You can imagine that there's someone, you go in and someone will play a saxophone for you.
Or a mime. Possibly.
Yeah. We didn't use this in the calendar, but we liked it so much that it has to be in the presentation.
It could be in the calendar though because of the
The Pegasus.
Pegasus.
Yeah. Okay, let's. Oh, that's us. We're out in the wild here, and we're standing in front of this building where they're building a building, and it's completely covered in plastic.
shrink wrapped
It's shrink wrapped.
on Beverly.
Let's move on. And there it is again with a fire truck. And you know, our friend is a builder and shouted out, you know, why they covered the buildings in plastic. But you know, I don't want anyone to do that tonight. I would prefer not to know. I just want to know that they covered a building in plastic. Let's move on. Here's another place. This is Sam's Tacos in Boyle Heights. Boyle Heights is particularly rich in the kind of scrappy buildings that we
Scrappy
like.
handmade things.
Yeah.
Handmade signs, hand painted.
And it's
It's
sort of,
not as gentrified as most places. This area.
and Sam's Tacos is a little bit of sort of a themed drive-through where they have a big elephant, a milkshake cup, and a giraffe, which you go past when you drive,
And a hamper.
and a big hamburger. And another interesting thing about it is it was very hard to capture. We actually don't feel that we fully successfully captured it. We like this painting, but it doesn't. You don't quite get the feel of this place. Let's go to the next slide, because there's a picture of it. You can see it's multi-dimensional. Next slide. Okay, well this is where
Toward the end.
this is where it gets pretty episodic, because we were planning to go to our friend Julie's house, and she lives in Silver Lake, and we had been on Beverly and in Koreatown, and then gone to Boyle Heights in the car, and we drove back on the 101. We get off the freeway, and on the ramp to get the off ramp to get to Silver Lake Boulevard, we heard a very loud sound and ran over something of some heft. We didn't have any idea what it was, but it was significant sound, and you could kind of feel it in the car. And so I was driving, we pulled up in front of an automotive place, which you'll see in just a second, Songs Automotive. And I got out and looked at the car, and the tire is completely flat. I mean, not just like it had a leak, but it was already completely flat. And so we called AAA, and Abira went and captured this. But we called AAA, and the guy showed up. It's all automated now. You used to talk to a person. Now it's all automated. A guy showed up. He's in a pickup truck. He's a nice kind of guy. He'd just gotten out of jail. He's wearing Spanx, which he's wearing like short sleeves, short
Very
pants.
tight shorts.
Yeah, and his
It's New Year's Eve
Spanx.
day.
He's high, and he's got a tool which looked more decorative than functional, and he could not get the lug nuts off of my tire, so he couldn't actually fulfill the one thing that we needed him to do, because I had a spare tire. He was going to take it off and put the little donut on. It didn't work, so I sent him away and went through the same thing again, because they ask you their AAA asks you on their automated service, do you have a functioning spare tire? And we do. And I answered it truthfully 2 times, and after the second time, I did understand that they need you to say that you don't have a spare tire, so they'll send a tow truck. So they sent another pickup truck.
The next slide.
Well, but wait,
Because this is where we pulled out. That was where we pulled over, and that's we were wandering around while Gordon was negotiating. I went and took that other picture, and then I'm looking around, and this is closed. Everything's closing, and it's New Year's Eve, and we got to get this car to a place, or
Pet
because
Boys.
we're not going to have time. And we thought we could maybe, if we could get it towed, but they kept AAA kept sending cars that with people that couldn't fix it. But I walked around and there was a guy in there. And he goes, "How's your day going?" I'm like, "Well, it's not so good." And he's like, "Oh, let me come out and look at it." If you want to go to a good mechanic, this guy is so good. Now,
And
he fixed it.
he had the real tools too. He had the tools.
Those two guys from AAA they didn't know what they were doing. But it was New Year's Eve, so I guess they don't use their best guys that night.
And they give them decorative tools.
But he got it. He fixed it for us, and he said he took out like a hammerhead. Or
Yeah, it was. He
that
said,
was in the tire.
yeah.
Like a piece of it.
He put his thumb in it. That's how big the hole. He put his thumb in it. He said, "Well, you ran over a hammerhead."
Yeah.
Okay, so this is on Temple, and this street was this is Hi-Fi Deli, which they had a giraffe out in front of it. The deli's now closed, but we knew this street pretty well because our friends had grown up over there. We spent a lot of time on that street, and I always loved that particular block because on one side of the street was the Hi-Fi Deli with the giraffe sign, and on the other side of the street was a hardware store with a big saw sign. The saw and the hardware store are gone. The Hi-Fi Deli sign is still there. Seth Rogen smokes. It's with some kind of show or podcast that Seth Rogen did. And that is Seth depicted there in the bottom. Next slide. This is the one place that we depicted where they actually have the real animal actually on the building. That's a stuffed marlin that is there on this Los Primos Mariscos. It's on Orange Grove.
Pasadena.
Yeah, Pasadena. It's on Orange Grove in Pasadena, just south of Fair Oaks. This is the Eagle Rock Motel in Highland Park. This is kind of close to us. Next. Fox's Restaurant in Altadena. This is Cypress Best Charbroiled Burgers in Cypress Park. We just Abira documented took a picture of this, and we just love the cat. And there's a guy that we knew, Ace Farron Ford. He was known in the neighborhood. He was a musician. I don't think he liked to call himself that. He was sort of an improvising musician. But we lost him this year, so I put him in this picture. He's not actually in the original evidence that we have, but we added him to it. Next. This is the building in Chinatown on College Street that has two addresses, one on each side of the building. And it didn't really totally fit our theme, so we added the dog walker.
Well, we started with this was one of the early ones when we didn't know what we were doing.
Yeah, right.
And Gordon had started it, and I finished it. And then we put the dog walker in. But you got it. Sometimes you just have to find a way.
Yeah, you have to grandfather things into your theme, which actually, coincidentally, we did on this one too, because there were no animals here, but we still
because that closed this year too.
Pigeons on the wire. Yeah, and so this is where another landmark at the Highland Theater has been there for 100 years, and this year they did not renew the lease, and the building is closed now, but it may open again. Who knows? It's one of those things that has not been announced. And there's a movie about this. There's a documentary about the Highland Theater, which is very interesting, actually, if you ever get a chance to see it. In 1973, vandals broke into the because it was a grand, the Highland Theater was a grand theater, and it was, but in the early 70s, vandals broke in and really did some real damage to it. They destroyed the screen and other things, and that there was like a little bit inexplicable. I don't know what motivated that. I don't know if they even know who did it, but the theater kept going. They survived that, and so sort of that was the point. And we don't want to end on a bummer with losing this landmark, but because it maybe it will become a theater again. Maybe the building will be saved. We don't know that, but we want to hold our heads high and live another day. And we're documenting these things while they're there, so because we want to document the city that we know and live in.
Here for sale for folks who are here, and how do people online order them?
They can go to Walrus Art Shop on Etsy to order them.
Okay, Walrus Art Shop.
Walrus Art Shop. We're the only Walrus Art Shop out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back to our stage, Helena. Do you want to go?
Sure.
So,
Tom left me getting some water.
do you need water?
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I don't know.
You don't need to move.
Oh, sorry.
It's gonna hear you.
Okay. When I was a girl of 8, awaiting the Christmas holiday with joyous, pants-peeing anticipation, my mother told me that she was mad at Mary, who lived in the row house next to ours in Baltimore. So when Mary wished me a Merry Christmas, my mother confided, instead of saying Merry Christmas back, I said, Mary, kiss my ass. I was shocked. That seemed sacrilegious. This Christmas memory stayed nestled in my mind like RFK Jr.'s worm. I wondered, why did my mother just tell Mary to fuck herself? My mother was not a fancy lady. She didn't get her hair done. She didn't wear makeup. I don't think she owned a pair of high heels. What she did have was perfect white teeth that she kept in her purse. If someone knocked on the door, she'd say, run and get my teeth out of my pocketbook. They'd be smiling up at me from the bottom among the tobacco flakes. That's why I have PTSD. Our family didn't put on airs or even concern ourselves too much with basic hygiene. White trash, I do not accept that epithet. It was hardworking families like ours that made this country what it is today. An imperialist, nuclear-armed superpower feared and reviled the world over. But I was a thinker, not a laborer, so I went to college. Like most college students, I was broke, so I sustained myself on the free hors d'oeuvres provided at university-sponsored events. If I needed clothes, I stole them from my boyfriend. I especially loved his underwear. No, I wasn't trans like all the kids are nowadays. His underwear were just comfy and clean, unlike my own threadbare panties. After graduation, I moved to Seattle at the height of grunge. Punk had been groundbreaking, but it was a lot of work. What with the crazy glue mohawks and those plaid pants with all the zippers. Grunge rockers wore whatever clothes were laying around. You could find clothes everywhere in a dumpster or on a clothesline. People didn't look like they rolled out of bed. They looked like they jumped off a freight car. Heck, I didn't even wear clothes. I spent most of those years in a tattered baby blue chenille bathrobe. I wore it to work, to the grocery store, to rock shows. I was making an important counterculture statement. When I had my first baby, I was suddenly part of another subculture, slovenly mothers. I'm sure you've seen them in the playground wearing their husband's old pants, their hair a bird's nest on top of their heads. Occasionally, they have no hair at all. As another slovenly mother explained, I was tired of the kids giving me head lice. Their diametrical opposite are the Mormon mommies. The pictures on their trad mom blogs show well-groomed women with composed curls. Their patriarchal God demands that they look attractive to their husbands. Slovenly moms don't necessarily believe in religion or shampoo. And why would they want to be attractive? Isn't that what got them into this whole mess? I was harried and haggard. I was looking after young children and working full-time as a nurse. At work, I wore red polyester permanent press scrubs, so I didn't have to worry about wrinkles or blood stains. On my days off, I wore whatever was puddled on the floor next to the bed. Eventually, I figured out a great life hack: just sleep in your clothes. That way, as soon as I got up in the morning, I was ready to carpe diem. This brings us to the Los Angeles winter of 2011, just a few days before Christmas. My sons Simon and Ira and their friend Max were attending a holiday camp at Wisdom Arts Lab. It was my day off, so I was home with my daughter Ada, who was only 2. Let me tell you a little about Wisdom Arts Lab. That place was hardcore. Smocks were banned. Needless to say, when I picked up the boys from camp, creative juices had flowed all over them. Of course, I didn't care. I wasn't looking too good myself that day, or any other, to be honest. It was around 3 o'clock, which is when kids start getting peckish. On the way home, Max saw a sign for Kentucky Fried Chicken and started lobbying hard. Then my children, who had never been to KFC, chimed in. I wanted our family to be vegetarian, although I didn't push it too hard after the kids started stealing meat out of our friends' refrigerators. I don't approve of fast food. KFC isn't a restaurant, it's a house of horrors. They torture the chickens, then the employees, and then your body. 11 spices and herbs, my ass. It's just salt and MSG, and probably corn syrup. They put corn syrup in everything. In the news, it's always meth this and that, but it's corn syrup that's killing the kidneys of America. Enjoy your dialysis. But I didn't want to be the politically correct elf that ruined Christmas. Did you know that KFC is a popular Christmas meal in Japan? The original Japanese franchisor somehow convinced the Japanese people that eating the deep-fried flesh of factory farm chickens is a good way to celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ, the deity of a religion they don't practice. I turned my great white minivan into the parking lot. The boys ran in, leaving me to unbuckle my daughter from the car. She had kicked off her shoes, and when I tried to put them on, she refused. And she wouldn't put on her jacket either. And there was literally nothing I could do about it. You see, at the time, I subscribed to a crackpot parenting methodology called taking children seriously. The basic tenet of taking children seriously is that it is abusive to force your children to do anything, ever. You can't even make them take a bath or change their clothes. I'm not making this up. If I were, I would come up with a better name than taking children seriously. It might sound like permissive parenting, but it's not. When in conflict, you are supposed to creatively work out a win-win for both of you, even though you haven't had a good night's sleep in 10 years. But if your kids are even a little bit smart, which mine are, they quickly realize that you don't have any leverage. So you are constantly cranky from losing yet another round of contract negotiations. I gave up, slung my daughter over my hip, and made my way to the counter to purchase a single meal of fries and nuggets. I didn't want to ruin their dinner appetites. At the table, the kids started complaining right away. That's not enough food. We're starving. What are you talking about? I said, that's plenty. I stood over the booth trying to keep order as they fought over the food. Hey, that's enough for you, I growled, swatting my son's hand away. You better share because that's all you're getting. A few minutes later, one of KFC's poorly paid employees came over and put an enormous takeout bag on the table. What's that? I said with disgust. I didn't order that. The lady over there bought it for you, he said, pointing at a portly, well-dressed woman carefully rubbing the grease off her manicured hands with a napkin. I went over and asked, why did you buy us all that food? If she had answered with something like, I just wanted to treat y'all for Christmas, I would have graciously thanked her and then threw the food in the garbage as soon as her back was turned. Instead, she said, like someone who has the phone number for CPS memorized, I can see that you can't afford to feed your children. I was insulted. I worked hard to take care of my family. I pointed out the window at my minivan, which was my prized possession. Yes, it's a gas guzzler, but I needed it to cart my kids to enrichment classes. See that minivan I barked? It's mine. She rolled her eyes. I have money to buy my children food, I snapped. I just don't want to. Then I heard a commotion and turned around to see that the kids had ripped into the takeout bag and were frantically shoving greasy chicken flesh into their holes. So I had to go over to the table to get that chaos under control. On the way out, the woman stopped by and thrust a $20 bill at me. What's this for? I chuckled. I told you I don't need money. Then she hissed, why don't you buy that baby some shoes? As she walked through the door, I called out, Mary, kiss my ass.
Thank you. Maybe you got shoes
I have been ambivalent about December the 25th for as long as I've been an adult. Growing up in my household, the only reason Christmas was memorable was because of the presents we received. My parents were not religious. We didn't attend church regularly. And although my parents knew that Christmas was about the celebration of the birth of Christ, they didn't connect any religious meaning to the holiday. And so neither did I. We celebrated Christmas because that's what everyone else did. The day had about as much meaning as Thanksgiving or the 4th of July. We always had a Christmas tree and presents underneath that tree, but somehow the exercise felt hollow. Once you grow up and you don't have the anticipation of presents to look forward to, and if you happen to have serious reservations about Christianity itself, then you ask the question, what is Christmas for? But even with my unenthusiastic history with the holiday, I do have some Christmas days that stand out. Like the one time my family traveled home to my grandparents for Christmas in 1969. We packed up our Rambler station wagon and we drove from Colorado Springs, Colorado to Bassett, Virginia. My father was stationed in Colorado at the time. I remember this because we drove halfway across the country and we never left the car. No hotel or motel stays. When Daddy got tired, he would just pull off into a rest stop and sleep for a few hours. I remember me and my brother Tony, we would pee into mason jars to avoid stopping anywhere to use the restroom. And I didn't understand why we did that until years later, when I learned about Jim Crow and segregation and the dangers of Black folks traveling. So anyway, We arrived at the big house. That was my grandparents' house. And I remember Grandmama Ruth and Granddaddy Carol sitting in the living room watching Hee Haw. It was Christmas Eve. My black grandparents sat and watched the country version of Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. And they loved it. Even though Charlie Pride was the only black person who ever appeared on the show. And I also remember eating so many tangerines, I made myself sick and continually vomited throughout that trip. We drove back to Colorado, me still sick, lying in the backseat of the Rambler. When we arrived home, I woke up the next morning. Our neighborhood was covered in a thick blanket of snow. I begged my mom to let me and my brother Tony outside to play. And when we ran out the front door and we plunged into all that whiteness, the snow came up to over our waists. The air was warm, and the snow tasted crisp and clean. And I remember thinking, how could it be so much snow and it be so warm I could take my coat off and not feel cold? I was 7 years old, and in my mind, that was Christmas magic. The following Christmases were uneventful until my father was stationed in Germany in the mid-70s. For 3 years, we lived on an American military base located in Münchweiler an der Oberalp. It was a picturesque village that could have been taken out of Grimm's fairy tales. One December night, a group of us neighborhood kids decided to go Christmas caroling. I had never been caroling before, but I was excited. I remember thinking, this is just like those Christmas movies I used to watch, like A Christmas Carol. We made our way to each apartment building on the block, and we stood in every courtyard singing. People came out onto their balconies to listen. Our group arrived at the last apartment building, and we sang our few songs, and just as we finished, there was a man standing in the balcony of the third floor south building, and he started to sing in this beautiful baritone. Stillige Nacht, heilige Nacht, alles schlaft, handsam wacht. Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright. That man sang Silent Night in German to a bunch of American kids under a moonlit night in a village in Germany. Oh, that moment was magical. My last memorable Christmas occurred when I lived in New York. There was a 3-year period after grad school when I lived in Washington Heights in Upper Manhattan in a barely furnished apartment by myself. I was working several jobs in order to pay the rent, going to auditions, and I was doing badly. It was a rough time. But every Christmas Eve, I would go to the Cathedral Chapel of St. John the Divine and watch Paul Winter's Winter Solstice concert. It was a free concert open to the community. The cathedral was always filled with New Yorkers, there to listen to Winter's ethereal holiday jazz program. And as he went through the program and the evening drew to a close, tiny handheld candles were being handed to the audience. Thin white rods with a paper cone at one end to catch the dripping glass, to capture the dripping wax. Thousands of flames flickered softly in the dimly lit cavernous cathedral as Winter's soprano saxophone echoed off the walls and into the rafters. Being among hundreds of New Yorkers in that house of worship, listening to jazz was the closest I felt to what Christmas should be. So, There are dozens of festivals and holidays that occur this time of year. There are over 50 worldwide celebrations in December alone. These celebrations are not solely about religion or dogma or gifts or commercialization. These festivals are about the human need to connect. They're a celebration of life and an appreciation of what we have right now in the moment. So the Christmases that meant the most to me were the times when I was with other people in communion, getting sweaty with classmates at a holiday dance party, or at a winter solstice concert in a beautiful historic chapel with hundreds of others, or at a small dinner with a few friends playing games and laughing. The magic all depends on the people you're with. And so that's the thought I'm going to hang on to as December the 25th rolls around. Thanks.
Welcome to the
Thank you. There we go. Okay. It is November 2016, and you know what happened. I go to an election night victory party, and the evening ends with all of us dazed, confused, and stumbling out to our cars. I have a feeling of suffocation. I want to run for the border. I have 2 young boys, ages 5 and 9. I've been widowed just a few years before. I feel vulnerable. I want to protect them. I want a better life for them. Like a lot of people, I become obsessed with leaving the country. I know some dude who knows another dude who has successfully done it. He traced and proved his ancestry and won Irish citizenship. Hey, why can't I make this happen too? 23andMe says I've got some Irish blood. So I hatch a plan. We'll go to Ireland over winter break and discover our Irish roots and get our papers. It'll be easy. So I scour the internet and I find a lovely Irish family looking for a home swap. And when I reach out on WhatsApp, I'm met with silence. Really? The mother of 2 girls said, you want to come to Dublin now in December? Do you know, are you aware it's cold and miserable here? No one in the whole world wants to come here. But I say, we do. We live here in California and it's sunny and hot almost 365 days a year. And with climate change, it's only getting worse. Winter, I say, bring it on. She's tickled and she says, oh, we just love LA. We've been twice already. The sunshine, the palm trees. Our favorite spot is a place called Van Nuys. Have you heard of it? Oh, we love Van Nuys. Well, she tells me that her town, Dalkey, is this beautiful, quaint seaside village located just 20 minutes outside of Dublin city center. It's famous for Vikings and medieval castles, windy roads and historic architecture. And oh, by the way, Bono and the Edge have houses there. So I say, hey, come on, who's getting the better deal? So we're going to Ireland. I clean the crap out of my house. I find some cheap flights and we're off. We arrive to a lovely, welcoming family home in a beautiful seaside setting. We wander around the village and explore the coastline, the one-lane roads and scenic walks. In the center, it has its own medieval castle and it's open to the public. we find this glorious neighborhood park and playground on a huge hill with another ancient castle at the top. It's the most beautiful park we've ever seen. The castle, which you can hike up to, it looks out on the water and down onto the beautiful large green space. You can take a zip line almost the whole way down. And we love it. We stay into the evening there. One day we buy a chicken and some produce at a local convenience store, and it is the most delicious non-GMO farm-to-table meal that I think I've ever tasted. It's less expensive than it would have been in the US, and it's fresh. We learned to take the metro from the little town into the city center, and it's faster than easier than even traveling from Brooklyn to Manhattan. We visit museums. I see a play at the Abbey Theater. We travel to the Wicklow Mountains, and we go to the Irish Diaspora Museum, and we learn that apparently everyone in the world is actually Irish, including the Beatles, Madonna, and even President Obama. Finally, I get a solid hint from Ancestry.com, a name and a place for my great-grandmother, Ellen O'Connell, born in County Cork. But we're leaving the day after tomorrow, and there's not enough time to go. So for our last day, on a whim, I decide we'll hop on a tour. We ride about 30 minutes outside of Dublin city center, where suddenly we're surrounded by an explosion of lush, rolling hills of green all around us. They say our first stop is the Great Hill of Tara. We follow our guide up the Great Hill. The closer I climb to the top, the more I struggle. My body feels like it's going to be lifted up and blown away by this great and terrible wind in this ancient place. Our guide shouts at us above the deafening roar of the gale. Look around you, he says. See, from this hill, almost all the counties of Ireland can be seen. For thousands of years, this was the seat of power, and all the great kings were crowned here. And St. Patrick came and gave his great talk, where all could see and hear it. And I stand at the top, and I look out at what seems to be all of Ireland, and I feel a strange cosmic electricity and ancestral power. Thousands of years of human history at my feet. I see what the great kings saw, and I feel connection rather than isolation. I'm teleported back into ancient history. So awed, we all float back to the bus. Our next stop, we arrive at a large open field, and we walk silently ahead toward this gigantic green earthen mound with Stonehenge-type rocks arranged ceremoniously around it. And a stillness falls over the group. This mound appears to be a type of ancient monumental architecture built into the earth. It has green grass on top and intricate stonework placed all around it. And the guide says, this is Newgrange. It is dated between 3,300 and 3,000 BC. That is 1,000 years older than the Egyptian pyramids at Giza. Ireland's first farmers erected this extraordinary megalithic edifice and decorated it with ornate, abstract, carved stone motifs, carefully constructed in the Neolithic period and preserved for thousands of years. It is a pass-through tomb where ancient burial rites took place. His eyes shine brightly as he tells us, and he says it was not until 1967 that they discovered that once a year, at the exact moment of the winter solstice, the tomb is magically flooded with bright light. in this fantastic display of astronomy and ingenuity. The place is breathtaking, this masterpiece of engineering, impossibly ancient, and yet here it still stands, perfectly preserved in the bogs of this country. If a fairy and a hobbit got together and built a pyramid, that's the only way I can describe it. But all over the world, these giant, impossible archaeological feats of engineering can be found. From South America to Asia, from Africa to Europe, from the Middle East to Polynesia. And some are 10,000 years old. Who were these great people? How did they do it? What are they telling us? I feel a deep sense of peace and purpose. Many of these ancient civilizations existed for thousands of years. And this is something that I am not really in touch with as I drive from the 5 to the 134 to the 170 to the 101 to the 405 to the 118 in LA. But I wonder, now in 2025, will I be able to find a clue to my great-grandmother's birth record in Cork, and maybe that will be enough to get me an EU passport? In Ireland, if your profession is writer, you pay no taxes. Will my kids get to go to college for free? Will I ever have free insurance? According to ChatGPT, it is probably no.
It really was. Thank you. Angela Bullock.
Lizzie, I just want to thank you for always providing this space for storytelling. And yeah, I'm not an atheist. I believe there is something beyond our knowing, some force that connects all living creatures, or perhaps even all matter. And I'm not quite an agnostic, believing there is no way to know the nature of God. I believe that in time we may know the true nature of whatever intelligence governs all existence. But right now, I tend towards the concept of humanism, believing that the value in and the goodness of human beings is what moves and shapes our experiences. That is where I prefer to put my faith. And that faith is being sorely tested right now. I feel as if I'm teetering on the edge of a cliff. I'm not about to jump. Instead, it feels as if the ground under my feet is beginning to crumble, and I'm afraid the earth upon which I'm standing is going to break away and disintegrate, and I will begin falling into an abyss of unknown darkness. Perhaps I'm being overly dramatic. I am a baby boomer. That generation born between 1946 and 1964. I was born in the mid-50s at the peak of the baby boom. And when I was a schoolgirl, my textbooks taught me that I lived inside a melting pot. A metaphor for multiculturalism, the melting pot concept began gaining acceptance during the early part of the 20th century as waves of immigrants began to flood into the country from around the world. On October 5th, 1908, a play entitled The Melting Pot, written by Israel Zangwill, opened in Washington, D.C. It said that former President Theodore Roosevelt leaned over the edge of his box and yelled, "That's a great play, Mr. Zangwill. That's a great play." While the phrase melting pot was coined sometime after the turn of the last century, the sentiment that this was a multicultural society began to take root much earlier. The Latin phrase, e pluribus unum, out of many, one, was a motto meant to describe the new country. Its use was suggested by a committee on July 4th, 1776, the day the Declaration of Independence was signed. We know that many of the founders were slave owners, and the myth of white supremacy was also mainstream at the time. Still, a seed was planted, I believe, for many Americans around a novel idea that many could become one. And as I grew, the idea of being inside that melting pot took hold of me. At the same time, while growing up in a Christian family, I struggled with the various myths I learned in Sunday school and distinctly remember debating my pastor early one Sunday morning. But what about the dinosaurs? I asked, having seen the giant bones at the Museum of Natural History. I was convinced that those beasts could not have fit inside Noah's Ark. Over time, the narratives that piqued my skepticism included the Christmas story. If I had been asked to choose between the story of a virgin girl giving birth to the Son of God inside a manger surrounded by farm animals, and a metaphor that suggested people from all over the world could come to one place, mix and mingle to make something new and call themselves Americans, I believe I would have chosen the latter. Being inside a melting pot, mingling into a thing that united us through a set of shared values, freedom and liberty. Now that was the concept my social studies loving self could get behind. The melting pot theory encouraged a feeling of safety inside an identity. The concept brought me comfort. I didn't know at the time that I was being indoctrinated, that the myth of the melting pot encouraged an erroneous belief that we Americans were or could be a cohesive whole, a one. By mid-century, the concept was an overriding theme in U.S. public school textbooks meant to unify the descendants of worldwide calamities. The Irish potato famine, the Opium Wars, the pogroms of Eastern Europe, the newly formed Iron Curtain, the Holocaust, Castro's Cuban Revolution. But also people just seeking better opportunity. And then there is that great internal movement of humanity, the migration of over 14 million African Americans out of the former slave states over a 70-year period starting in the early 1900s and ending at or around 1975. My family was part of it, settling in Brooklyn, where I benefited from President Johnson's war on poverty initiatives and was first taught the myth that I lived in a melting pot. However, I've grown up. It's taken a while to remove the blinders from my eyes, but due to recent developments, I've finally given up my fantasy. I have a beautiful niece who refused to take the COVID vaccine when it was finally made available because she was afraid it was going to leave her barren. I have a cousin who voted for Trump because Harris wasn't godly enough and she felt that Trump was. I have an old friend who is an anti-vaxxer, thinks the World Health Organization is the devil's handiwork and hero worships Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And I just discovered that one of my husband's nephews is a serious flat earther. No, look it up, he said over the phone. You can find it on Google. This is my cliff. This is me teetering on the edge. We Americans are far from alike as the last election has made blatantly clear. My vote was me clinging to that old childhood fantasy that enough of us shared the same vision of who we are. The Constitution is what I'm attempting to cling to right now. I have the First Amendment taped to my bedroom wall. I placed it there earlier this year when I held a greater sense of hope in my heart than I do right now. But I now cling to the words, hoping they will sustain me, hoping that those Americans who chose to vote the way they did will come back to these ideas before we lose it all. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. That little girl is still inside me. The child who believed that this is what it means to be a free American, not the price of eggs this week or the fear of a transgender child. That little girl has no choice but to cling to her belief, because the opposite of those words could mean her destruction. The flawed and brilliant men who wrote those words were social scientists. Science is about experimentation. Scientists and artists start and stop and start and stop. They do not get it right the first or the second or the third time. So what they must do is keep trying, reworking the experiment, the concept, keep mixing the formula, the recipe, until we get it closer. We keep stirring that pot, mixing those flavors, and still we may never get it right, because the world keeps spinning and the universe keeps changing, and human beings are very human beings. So I ask myself, what am I meant to do? What is my job as an artist in this season? 'Tis the season for what exactly? To remind ourselves of the richness of our diversity, or will it be a season based on revisionist history and white supremacy? That we are a people possessing a shared responsibility to protect our values as set forth in that Constitution, or a country bent on governing through retribution, misogyny, regression, hatred, and greed? Perhaps this democratic experiment is as much a fantasy as the myth of the melting pot. We are about to find out.
Thank you.
Angela has an ability to really catch the moment, and I am so grateful. I'm honored to have this stage for you. For all of you. Arabella, welcome to the True Story family and community. Arabella, well done, right? Helena, Angela, Rafeal. There's no one there. They're over there. Gordon and Abira. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your talents and your honesty and your truthfulness. Thanks for sharing your truth. So thanks everybody who came out. There's a lot of cookies and cake out there. And if you folks at home were here, you could have some, but you're not. Please donate if you can. We run on your support, so thank you. And our next event won't be till February, but we will have some of our stories online very soon. But February 2nd, And the theme, of course, is Groundhog Day.
Oh, yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful holiday season. Thanks for coming. Thank you, everybody. Now it's a party.